Hello everyone, welcome to Gardening TLC. How many of you are afraid to go around and cut your stuff back because you're afraid you're gonna kill it? Well, if you are, this is the video for you, so stick around. We're gonna go around the gardens today and cut back perennials and bushes. It is the beginning of summer. All of our spring bloomers are done, and there's a lot of reasons why you want to prune. You want to prune because maybe you want to control the size of something. You want to prune because maybe it bloomed in the spring, those shrubs, and they're done and they need to be pruned back to control their size, give them shape, have a new flush of growth. Or maybe you have perennials that if you cut them back now, they'll reflush, look good, and some of them will rebloom. So come along with me and let's get started. I'm Michelle and I live in Northern Illinois, Zone 5. Welcome to my garden. I hope that you guys learned some things today about pruning and that at the end of this video, you're not afraid to go out into your own garden. I will be pruning for all the reasons that I listed at the introduction to the video. Now, let me talk about some of the tools that I'm going to use. Now, I am going to bring my little hand pruning saw just in case. I do have a few shrubs that we're going to be pruning, but most of them we're going to be doing a heading back. And a heading back prune is typically where you're taking off just the top. Okay, I'm not going to be using hedge clippers for anything because I don't want to leave stubs in any of the shrubs that I'm pruning. Now, one of the reasons that you prune a shrub in early summer is because it was a spring bloomer. The rule of thumb is if it blooms in the spring, you want to prune it right after it's done blooming. So that's weigelias, lilacs, all of those beautiful spring bloomers. So we have a weigelia that we're going to be pruning. I don't know if I'll need this, but I'm going to bring it just in case. The other tools that I'm going to be using are my Felcos, which I'll probably use for almost everything that we do. I like to do a lot of hand cutting. I think it's faster and easier, but I do have my shears and I do have my loppers. So if I need them, I have them. Now I'll be leaving piles throughout the whole property and then I'll go back and pick them up later. But one of the things that I like to do is control some of the size of my perennials. So as you can see right back here, I have a Baptisia australis. It's an absolutely gorgeous plant, but they're pretty big and I don't want it to be this big. So I cut it back one year because one of the guys ran over it with a skid steer when we were doing a project and kind of had half of it broke. So I ended up cutting the whole thing back. And happy accident, it reflushed, it was smaller and it looked great the rest of the year. So after that, I just started cutting it back every single year. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this back about that far from the ground and then it'll reflush and regrow again. We are going to start with the Baptisia australis. This is a perennial. Yes, this big thing is a perennial. When I first started gardening, oh my goodness, I didn't cut anything back. And the reason I'm doing this video is because I remember thinking that if I cut that back, I'm going to kill it. Oh my God, I can't cut it back. I spent all that money on it, but it looks horrible and I don't like it. Aha, there's the key. I grew my skill, grew my knowledge through the years of gardening and other people and reading books and just whatever, however I learned. And I have found that, you know what, a lot of things look better if you cut them back and they get that new flush of growth on them. Perennials are pretty forgiving, and I've done some cutbacks on perennials where I wanted to see what would happen, and it might have done some funky thing, but it always came back the next year. So I'm not afraid to cut anything anymore. So we're going to start with this guy first. This is a Baptisia australis. I probably shouldn't have planted it here, but I did. I love it. I love the blooms on it. I just don't like the size. So I'm going to make it smaller and I'm going to cut it back. So I've got my Felcos, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up this canopy. I'm going to get right in there and I'm just going to cut it back and make a pile on the driveway. So let's go. There it is all done, and I was able to clean up my dead tulip foliage that was underneath it because those are totally done. We're going to go cut back the solar flare now. I have two baptisias that I want to keep controlled in size. So that is definitely one of the reasons why you want to cut back. Sometimes we cut things back because it's hot and they're brand new and they need to focus on roots and developing that bottom foliage and a good healthy plant versus flowers. So I have 3 new penstemons in here they're called Dark Towers. I planted them about a month ago and it's been really hot and they're stressing. And guess what? They're first year plants. I'm not really worried about whether or not they have flowers on them. I really want to develop a nice healthy plant. I'm going to go in and cut these back, probably this far from the ground, and then hopefully instead of focusing their energy on flowers and being tall and lanky that don't look good anyways, I'm going to get a new flush of growth on the bottom. And even if I don't, I want them to focus on root development. So we're going to cut those back next. All right, there it is, all cut back. That is the solar flare baptisia. It was really big. I do have some dead foliage back here to pick up. Those are spent daffodils that have been dying back, re-energizing. And then you can see where I cut back the penstemon, and I just cut them to the top of the next set of leaves. There's another one right here, and then there was a third one right over there. So I want that to focus on just making roots. Look at this beautiful patch of coreopsis in here where my little turtles are swimming away. Isn't that great? I had to ditch the hat. It was just smashing the sweat into my head. It's pretty humid out. I have to go back to the bandana to catch the sweat. All right, another reason to prune is because there's spent flowers on it. It's not going to bloom again, but we just kind of want to shape the shrub or perennial and make it look better. So this is a peony shrub. It's done blooming. I don't want all those spent flowers on there. I'm just going to cut them off. So I go down to the next set of leaves and just clean up the plant and get rid of all of the dead flowers that are on top. Notice when I cut the peony bush that I cut more down inside the shrub than I did just cutting the tips off. And I did that so that I could shape this to be more of a round shape and not like some tall, some low. I just wanted it to look nice. So sometimes you're pruning not just to deadhead the flowers off, but also to shape the shrub up so that it looks good the rest of the season. Right here behind me, I have a patch of black-eyed Susans. These are the Viet's little Susies. Now, these haven't even bloomed yet, but one of the things I'm going to show you is a little trick that I do that takes a flower that only blooms for 4 to 5 weeks to a flower that will bloom for 10 to 12 weeks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut some of the plants down in half. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to slow the bloom time down. So the ones that I cut in half will catch up later with the ones that I didn't cut in half. The ones that I didn't cut in half will bloom on schedule, but the ones I cut back will be delayed. And when the ones that I didn't cut back finish blooming, the ones that I did cut back will start to bloom. I hope I said that right and it made sense. But it staggers the bloom time so that instead of just the 5 weeks, all of them blooming at once, I now have 10 weeks of bloom. So we're going to get that done next. Absolutely another reason why you cut perennials back, because right now if you go to the garden center, they're on sale. And so you're going to find them and they look like this. Okay, there's nothing wrong with this plant. It's just done blooming. Don't put it in the ground like this though. Cut those flowers off. Do it. Cut them off. And just put this part in the ground. Your plant will be so much happier because it can focus on root development. Who cares if you get flowers this year? This is about next year. And when they're on sale, oh my gosh, how can you pass that up? So cut them back. Another reason you want to prune is because you have spring blooming shrubs. Now, most of them want to be pruned when they're done flowering. This is a Sunset Monet Weigela that finished blooming. It was absolutely glorious, but now it needs a haircut. So we are going to cut this back or head it back by a third. What I mean is I'm going to take the top branches off. I also might do an inner prune, which is the lower branches down below all the way to the base. I'll take out some of the bigger ones that are down there to let some air flow through our shrub. So we're pruning this now because if we don't and we try to prune it later, guess what? I'll cut all the flowers off and then I won't have any flowers for next year. The other thing is I want to control the size a little bit. I want to bring it down. Now that doesn't mean that I'm trying to take a shrub that gets 5 by 5, which is about, yeah, that's about the size of this shrub, and make it a 2 by 2. No, I'm not trying to do that. I want this to be its full, beautiful size. If you want a shrub that only gets 2 by 2, buy a shrub that only gets 2 by 2. I see people try to hack away at their shrubs and force them to be smaller than they're supposed to, and then they never ever look good as far as the shape goes. So read your tags when you buy shrubs to make sure you're buying the size that you want to begin with. All right, let's head this back. While I'm at it, I am going to cut the hosta flowers off. I'm just one that doesn't like hosta flowers. I grow hostas for foliage, and when I see the flowers, I take them off. How many of you are freaking out over how much I just cut off of that? It'll be okay. A bush takes a little bit longer to recover than a perennial, but it will still recover. I cut it lower than that before. So Regilias can actually take a rejuvenation prune all the way to the ground. So that is nothing. And I still only took 1/3 off the top. Another reason that you prune perennials is because you want them to reflower. So I have some nepa, Walker's Low catmint, and some salvia May-night in the back garden that are looking really rangy, and they seriously need a haircut. So you can see here how they look, and yes, they're still blooming, but they look sloppy, they look messy. There's new growth actually pushing out from the middle of that nepa, and if I give these a haircut, they will be so much better and look so much neater. So guess what? We're gonna cut that back. That big rangy mess down there is 6 plants. Yeah, 6 plants, that's it. Now you might look at this salvia patch and go, there's still a lot of flowers on there, but if you look a little closer, look a little closer. You get in here, see how it's starting to flail open in the center right there? So that's a sign that it needs to be cut back. Not only that, but if you look at all of the flower calexes, not all of them have flower blooms on them, and some of them, it's really just on the tips. Now salvia can be done a couple ways. You can take this all the way to the ground if you have enough growing time to get it to all flush back and rebloom. I am at the end of June. I probably have enough time to do that, but I don't take it all the way to the ground. I'm gonna take it to the bottom of the flowers or the top of the foliage, maybe a little bit lower because it is flailing open a little bit. And then what'll happen is the sun will energize it and it will get new growth and it'll get more flowers. They'll be littler and there won't be as many, but the whole plant itself will still look better. And that in itself is a reason to cut these back. Now the nepa, which is the lavender flowers behind here, what happens with nepa is it grows up and it gets this great big plant like you see back here. That is 3 plants. But what happens is it'll start to flush new growth up the center of the plant, and while that new growth is growing up, it pushes the old growth out and it flays it out. So it kind of looks like it's laying down, and then that's when it starts to look sloppy and rangy. Now I'm always hesitant to cut this patch back because this, for me, is a major bee pollinator area. We have beehives in our back 16 acres, and I know that the bees come to this area, but I also need my gardens to look good, and I just planted some heliopsis and some blue globe thistle in a layer down below this where I need to be able to see it, number one, and number two, because they're new, I need light and water to get to it, so I also need to cut this back for that reason. So I'm cutting them back because I'll get a new flush of growth and new flowers, but I will also have a nicer looking plant, and that's another reason to cut them back. I do want to be careful when I do this. I don't use really fast movements. I do look at the patch before I cut it because there could be bees on it. I don't want to get stung. So I'm going to make sure that I take care when I do this. Now, if you're deathly afraid of bees, something that you're not sure you want to do, I would wait and do it in the evening, like late before the sun goes down, when all the bees have gone home, and then they're not on the plants for you. I'm not afraid. I just and careful. I am gonna use gloves when I do this one because there's always spiders in this one and I hate spiders. So what I'm gonna do is put the gloves on and then I'm just gonna gather a bunch up, hold it, clip it with my Velcros, and then I'll just make a pile and then come back and pick it all up. So I'm looking for bees, I don't see any. Big pile of debris I have to come and pick up, but there you go, 3 salvia and 3 nepatas. Can you believe all of that with 6 plants? But now they will grow back, be happier, and I will be happier because it doesn't look like a rangy mess. I'm gonna do my knockout roses next, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take my shears and I'm just gonna chop off the dead flowers on the top. I'm not gonna follow any rose pruning rules or anything like that. I find with knockout roses, they really don't care if you do that or not. So I'm just gonna prune the tops off, and then they'll cycle into another set of blooms in 3 to 4 weeks, which is what they do anyways. I just don't want to look at the dead flowers that are all done, so I cut them off, and it's got to be easy or I won't do it. So chop chop. There you go. I just chopped the tops off. There's the pink one. And this one had 2 pretty red ones, so I left them on there. And there you go. I just chopped off the top, and watch. They'll rebloom and look just fine. The next one I'm gonna do is Lady's Mantle. This one here, I just planted a whole bunch of new ones right here, and they are struggling a little bit because it got hot pretty quick. So I am gonna cut these in half, but this is an older patch right here, and I usually always cut them back because I find that if I don't, when they're done flowering, the foliage doesn't look good until the end of the year. But if I cut them now, bite the bullet, wait a couple weeks, then they look good through the rest of the year. And so we're gonna go through and cut them all in half. And I'm not particular about how I cut them. I just kind of bunch them up, grab them, cut them in half, and I'm done with it. So that's next. I'm gonna show you this one close up. See, as you get in here, you can see how the edges of the leaves are starting to look kind of brown and tattered. But if you really get down inside of here, you can see new growth starting to form down here at the bottom. So I want all that nice new, see, look at that little baby one down there. I want all that nice new foliage to come up through here, and all of this spent foliage or the stuff that's browning to go away. Guys, do you feel better about going out in your garden and giving it some little haircuts? So remember, spring bloomers typically want to be cut when they're done flowering. Whether they're going to reflower or not, a lot of times they can't carry their foliage all the way until the end of the summer and still look good. So giving them that little haircut helps to refresh your plant, whether it's going to rebloom or not. Also, remember those shrubs, if they bloomed in the spring, you got to cut them right after they're done blooming, or you'll lose all your flowers if you try to cut them later. Hopefully this eased your mind just a little bit so you're not so afraid to go out there and do that. So I'm Michelle. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.